Madam President.
Democratic
Are we
leader?
in a quorum?
We're not.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, Madam President, I just listened to the Republican leader, and there was a glaring omission in his speech. He did not mention what the rally yesterday, my speech, or the case before the court was about: a woman's constitutional right to choose. To the women of America, what we're talking about here, what I am fighting for here, is your right to choose. An issue, of course, Leader McConnell completely ignored in his speech. I feel so passionately about this issue, and I feel so deeply the anger of women all across America about Senate Republicans in the courts working hand in glove to take down Roe v. Wade. I just read about a woman in Shreveport who, under the Louisiana law, now before the Supreme Court, would have to travel over 300 miles to exercise her constitutional freedoms. And this is happening in states across the country. Republican state legislatures are restricting a woman's right to choose so severely as to make it non-existent. And the courts are now likely to go along because Senate Republicans have confirmed nominees they believe will strip away a woman's rights and fundamentally change this country, going so far as to deny a duly elected president the right to pick a Supreme Court justice. Republicans are afraid here in the Senate to confront this issue directly, so they try to accomplish through the courts what they'd never accomplish in the court of public opinion, and they leave women out in the cold. So yes, I am angry. The women of America are angry. And yes, we will continue to fight for a woman's right to choose. I will continue to fight for the women of America. Now, I should not have used the words I used yesterday. They didn't come out the way I intended to. My point was that there would be political consequences for President Trump and Senate Republicans if the Supreme Court, with the newly confirmed justices, stripped away a woman's right to choose. Of course, I didn't intend to suggest anything other than political and public opinion consequences for the Supreme Court, and it is a gross distortion to imply otherwise. I'm from Brooklyn. We speak in strong language. I shouldn't have used the words I did, but in no way was I making a threat. I never would do such a thing. And Leader McConnell knows that. And Republicans who are busy manufacturing outrage over these comments know that too. Now, what will remain long after the clamor over my comments dies down is the issue at hand: a woman's constitutional right to choose and Republican attempts to invalidate it. The fact that my Republican colleagues have worked systematically over the course of decades to install the judicial infrastructure to take down Roe v. Wade and do very real damage to the country and to the American way of life, that is the issue that will remain. And I owe an obligation to the women of America to fight for their constitutional rights. I yield the floor.
Democratic whip.
Madam President, I come to the floor this morning as a Senate colleague who may know Chuck Schumer better than most. We lived under the same roof for almost 20 years. We know one another. We know each other's families. We have been together through moments of sadness and triumph. I know him well, and I come to the floor this morning to make this statement. I respect Chief Justice John Roberts, but I respectfully disagree with the statement he made yesterday about Senator Schumer's comments before the Supreme Court building. It is not in Chuck Schumer's nature to physically threaten anyone, or to create a dangerous situation for any person. That is just not Chuck Schumer. Even his passion, as you just heard, about the issue of women's health care would not lead him to that position. Yes, as he said, he could have chosen his words more carefully, but is there a person in public life who's ever stood in this chamber or any other who wouldn't say the same about some public utterance? What troubles me is that he is being admonished publicly by President Donald Trump for his use of words. Being admonished by President Trump for his use of words. It just takes your breath away to think that this president, with his thousands of tweets and statements and utterances, outrageous as they've been, would be standing as a judge of others when it comes to the use of language. And I listened carefully this morning as Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, came to the floor and spoke. When he talked about his singular respect for the Supreme Court and judicial independence, he used the phrase repeatedly, judicial independence. He called the judiciary, rightly, a pillar of the American government. Does Senator McConnell think we have forgotten what he did when it came to this same Supreme Court after Justice Scalia passed away? He intentionally left a vacancy on the court for almost a year before it was filled for political purposes. We remember when President Obama, in the last year of his presidency, offered the nomination of Merrick Garland, a highly respected circuit court judge in the District of Columbia. Do you remember what this Republican leader, Senator McConnell, did in response? This man who so admires this pillar of the American government, the judiciary, he refused to even personally meet with Merrick Garland, President Obama's nominee. And he instructed his colleagues on the Republican side to do the same, to shun him, to give him the cold shoulder, and to make it clear that for a year there'd be a vacancy on the court because he, Senator McConnell, was praying he would get a political opportunity to fill that vacancy if a Republican were elected to the presidency. And of course, that's what happened in 2016. So for Senator McConnell to come before us and talk about his respect for the court, keeping politics out of the court, calling it a pillar of the American government, has he forgotten what he did to Merrick Garland? And incidentally, despite his constitutional contortion, that for some reason in the last year of a presidency, that president has given up any constitutional right to fill a vacancy. Senator McConnell was recently asked, well, what if that happens in the last year of President Trump's administration? Well, he wasted no time saying, of course I would let President Trump fill the vacancy. As transparent as possible, his partisan motives when it comes to that Supreme Court. So if he wants to show respect for the court, it certainly has not been demonstrated, starting with the vacancy of Justice Scalia. And how about his single-minded effort, Senator McConnell's single-minded effort to fill every federal vacancy across the United States as quickly as possible, sadly, with men and women who scarcely have any experience in service in our judicial system. So far, President Trump has sent to this Senate, and Senator McConnell has accepted and approved 9 nominees for federal judiciary who have been found unanimously unqualified by the American Bar Association. 9 men and women who have such extreme backgrounds or such limited experience, they shouldn't sit on the federal bench, but Senator McConnell, with his respect for the judiciary, couldn't wait to give them lifetime appointments. Oh, you ask, wait a minute, what about President Obama? How many did he send to this Senate who were found unanimously unqualified by the American Bar Association? None. None. Not one. That is what we're facing here with Senator McConnell's singular strategy to fill the courts with people who share his extreme views on women's health care, on civil rights, and on so many other fundamental issues. So preaching on this floor about your respect for the Supreme Court, your respect for our federal judiciary, doesn't go very far when you take a close look at the record that Senator McConnell has written. So at this point, let me suggest that we move forward from this day and not dwell on what the morning headlines might be. We have work to do. And it would be better if we did it in a bipartisan fashion with respect for one another. I stand ready to work with those on the other side of the aisle to achieve that goal. But I want to say at this moment that dwelling on this particular chapter doesn't serve the American people. They didn't send us here to squabble and fight. They sent us here to pass important legislation that respects their right to quality, accessible, affordable health care. They sent us here to make sure that women have the basic constitutional right to make the most important personal decisions of their lives. They sent us here to make sure that we serve this country in giving working families a fighting chance. All of the other things that we spend time talking about on this floor diminish in comparison. It's time for us to roll up our sleeves and let the Senate be more than a rubber stamp for the federal judiciary when there are partisan goals in mind by Senator McConnell and others. Madam President, I yield the floor. Suggest quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.